Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of IGEL Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I've got with me a couple guys from the IGEL crew, the IGEL company, people who actually work for IGEL this time today. Got Chris Feeney, who's the local sales engineer. Chris, how's it going?
It's going well, Andy. Once again, exciting topic today. It's depending on what gets you excited, but we got a good one, I think.
You got to know your audience, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And so it was just 24 hours ago, same time yesterday, I think we were doing one on how to print in an IGEL world. Now we're going to talk about how to patch in an IGEL world versus the competition, aka Windows. I was just telling you guys, I'm trying to do everything remote because I'm working from from somewhere else during the next couple of days, and I'm using my Windows laptop, and I get more inconsistent things happening on this thing than I do on my Chromebox or my Mac that I use. I love Microsoft, I love Windows, but it has never been a perfect world when you use Windows.
That's for sure.
Inconsistent. So we got with us Simon Townsend. Simon, how's it going?
Very good, Andy. Thank you for inviting me onto today's call. Pleased and excited to be here.
Simon, where are you joining us from, and what's your official title at IGEL?
Official title is Chief Marketing Officer. So I joined IGEL about 2.5 years ago. I spent a year looking after EMEA marketing, and then when Jed Ayers moved up into the CEO position, I was fortunate enough to now hold the responsibility for all marketing globally within IGEL. But I've been around this space for about 20 odd years. I've started out my career as a systems engineer. I've ran post-sales delivery teams. I've been involved in product management. I spent many years at a company many people know called AppSense. I've worked at Avanti. I've been selling Citrix and IGEL types of solutions for a long, long time. So I suppose I like to try and think to myself as a Chief Technical Marketing Officer, but that's not my official title. And I'm based about 20 miles west of London. So if you've ever landed at Heathrow and you went west towards Wales, then you'd stumble across where I am. So we've got a Microsoft campus, Oracle campus down where we are. Lots of sort of like the tech companies, particularly in the software space, are based in and around where I live. We like to think of it as the Silicon Valley of the UK.
Yeah. Sounds like a place I would love to accidentally or intentionally have to go visit. So let me know when you're ready.
As soon as this madness is all over, you'll be more than welcome, my friend, more than welcome.
So I do like your story immensely because that is near and dear to who I am, who my company is, who Pete Downing, my CMTO, is. I love technical guys who understand and appreciate marketing and sales. That to me is the perfect people to be leading a company, people who understand products that work, and how to talk to people about those products that work. So that's really good. We'll have you on multiple times. Anytime you want to come on and talk through what's happening in your technical marketing world, that would be awesome.
Appreciate that, Andy. Thank you.
I know a lot of technical people that can't tell a good story, and that's great, but it's super nice when they can tell a good story about the technology it is they're advocating.
Yeah. It's a challenge. I'll be honest with you, because that's why I need good people like Chris on these types of calls for me, right? Because over time it is difficult to try and keep up with both what's needed from a marketing point of view and also what is going on in the technical world. But I certainly enjoy it, and I certainly enjoy talking to customers about challenges that are out there in the world and seeing if we can provide them with solutions that can fix it, right? So we're all salespeople, marketeers, and technical at the same time. But if you can tick multiples of those boxes, then it's a good thing. I know Chris does a good job of that as well.
I'm going to attempt a segue here to the topic. I'm looking at this, reading through it, and you're talking about your background, your story, and I was thinking about my last 20 years getting into the IT. And do you remember where you were when the I Love You virus attacked Microsoft Exchange and went rampant through companies' email systems.
Yeah.
I mean, it is the month of love, February, Valentine's Day coming up here, and I just remember I had for me, I was using PST files, so I was always just working out of that. I wasn't really tied to my Exchange mailbox, and I remember that actually helping me in that particular instance, whereas other folks couldn't access their email because I Love You virus had just, gone crazy. But that was like sort of that first real big one, like, holy crud, where did that come from moment. And so, which sort of tees up, what's the topic of the day, Andy?
Well, so yeah, let me do a couple things. I do want to say something. Simon painted a pretty picture about marketing and technology together. I'll say it the opposite way. The last thing I want to do is talk to marketing people who have no idea how the technology works. That is a massive turnoff to me. Something that I work really hard. I work really hard to avoid. I mean, anybody can just spout off a bunch of stuff they read from somebody else, but to know how an operating system works around a kernel and be able to talk to people about it, that gets me excited. I know that's kind of dorky, but that's who I am.
No, you're
right.
All right.
So Chris, real quick, my answer to your question is, I think I was working for a shop that was a Lotus Notes shop. And as much as I hated Lotus Notes for that day, that period of time, I was like, oh, okay, I can go with it.
Yeah, it was 21 years ago, May 5th, 2000. So not quite February, but still, it attacked Outlook and Microsoft vulnerabilities and Exchange email, and it just went rampant. So, anyways, VBS
Chris,
vulnerabilities.
The topic is a blog that Simon wrote back in October of last year, and the title of it's called "Another Patch Tuesday: What's the Opportunity Cost of Patching?" And so I think what we're really going to talk about here is work with Simon to figure out help people understand what it means to have to look. Again, I think I may have said this a minute ago. I'm a big fan of Microsoft, big fan of Windows, but it is a very, very legacy, very complex, very capable operating system that in most cases it's way overkill for what you need to get the job done, and it's impossible to 100% secure it at the endpoint.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, if we sort of start, we're going back to October 2020. Microsoft Patch Tuesday had come about. To sort of put that into a time frame, the PS5 and the Xbox Series X hadn't shipped yet. Donald Trump was still president, and Microsoft came out with a list of vulnerabilities on Patch Tuesday, which there was actually less in this particular Patch Tuesday than what we'd seen in previous times. So that's what first of all got my attention. I was like, hold on a second. Of all the vulnerabilities that have come out in the last 12 months, there's actually less in this particular release than there has been, and sort of that got me looking into it a little bit more. I started looking at, okay, well, what was the makeup of the patch? Was it affecting Exchange? Was it affecting Windows devices at the edge, etc.? And we've been talking about patching for a long time, and really what the cost of managing a Windows desktop at the endpoint was, and that then got me onto, well, what's the real cost of patching in a Windows environment? If you're deploying Windows out at the edge, not in a VDI in a desktop as a service environment, what is the cost of that, and what's the opportunity cost? And that's really what the blog post was about, which is, we're currently now we were in 2020, we're now in 2021. What's the opportunity cost? What's the lost opportunity of having to deal with patching? And when you've got hundreds, if not thousands or tens of thousands of devices, which arguably are now all working at remote locations on dirty networks in people's homes, and IT is having to spend a whole host of time patching them, you have to sort of ask yourself, what else could IT be doing as opposed to doing that patching? And so that's really what the blog post was about. It's like, it's 2021, guys, and we're still having to pay IT staff. We're having to pay them to actually sit there and find out what vulnerabilities are out there, what patches exist, how many devices could this affect, to test it all, what applications could it break, to roll it out, how are you going to roll it out, because now everyone's on crappy VPN connections and limited bandwidth. Patching just suddenly becomes this horrible task that IT needs to go through every other Tuesday. And I come on to sort of like the cost of patching of offices as well in a second, but I just sit there and I just think to myself, surely there's better ways that IT could be spending their time than worrying about patching and spending all of this time. Now, don't get me wrong, patching is incredibly important, and we can talk about some of the sort of like the recent threats that have come about and some of the things that we're seeing. I mean, since I wrote the blog, we've had the whole SolarWinds thing that's blown up, and we've had new versions of ransomware that are out there now and different tactics that are being used. But so it is important, and it is a security problem. But from an IT operations point of view, and for those people that manage Windows and endpoints, I can't help but feel there just has to be a better way. And as you guys know, deploying VDI and desktop as a service is such a easier way of dealing with this problem than trying to manage Windows at the edge.
So I got a couple of things I want to add to what you just said there. One, I kind of talked about Microsoft and how much is involved in their operating system. The other part of that too is it's so widely used that the attack vector is huge. And so let's say you could go attack Linux all day long, and maybe you could find stuff to attack. I'm sure you could, but hackers don't care because it's such a minimal part of the footprint. Microsoft technologies are the ones getting all the vulnerabilities written for it because there's value in the scalability of that hack. And so part of it's just the fact that Microsoft's on the radar and everybody else, other than Apple maybe, is under the radar, and sometimes it's good to not be noticed, especially when you're trying to just get work done.
Yeah. I mean, Chris brought up the I Love You virus of 2000. I won't embarrass myself and tell you where I was back in 2000 when that thing broke, but it involved sort of throwing up a hat and getting a degree and drinking a lot of champagne and beer, probably. So it was probably right at the start of my career, to be perfectly fair. But the I Love You virus was created and distributed and went around so quickly because it used email, it used Outlook and address books, etc. But it was done for fun, right? It was almost done to prove a point. It was, and where we are today, the attacks that we're seeing and what we're trying to protect ourselves against is really against, either countries or organizations that are trying to make money. And to your point, because there is so much Windows out there, because it is easier to attack. I mean, that tends to be the place that people are trying to go for, because guess what? It's the easiest place to make money, right? It's quite interesting. I don't know whether you guys are into your gaming and stuff, but you'll be aware of perhaps aware of a game called Cyberpunk 2077, is it? I think those guys, that's developed by a Polish software firm, CD Projekt, I think it is, and they've just been recently attacked with a new method of ransomware, and it's quite interesting to see the change just in the last couple of months, right? Historically, if you think about WannaCry and NotPetya that sort of took over the world recently, it was all about getting into an organization, holding them ransom, encrypting their data, and then saying, right, pay me money, otherwise you're not going to get your data back. We're not going to give you the keys to uncrypt it. What's actually now happening is there's this concept of doxware, which is basically where instead of encrypting the data, they actually take a copy of it. So they go into the people that created the cyberpunk, they take their information, copy it up to the cloud, and then they turn around and say, unless you pay us the ransom, we're actually just going to release this onto the web and make it publicly available. So it's a new way of holding people accountable for their data. But either way, times have definitely moved on from where we were with the I Love You virus and sort of, some guy sat in a corner, some techie trying to make himself famous, to people are making money out of it. And sadly, Windows at the edge at the moment and email is continues to be one of those ways that, people can go about it.
So Simon, let's jump into the next section here. I'll make one off-the-cuff comment, which I often make in these conversations. Well, why don't we just fix it by unplugging everything from the internet? Well, guess what? That's not reality this day and age. Maybe in the early '90s that was reality, but it's not now. But so Chris, before we jump into this section about patching is an operations thing, not a security thing, which I think Simon kind of touched on just now. Any comments or thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just thinking back, sort of this story. IGEL does a good story, just talking about sort of the evolution of various, waves of IT. And this is, I think, one of those things, right, where, back in 2000, Windows had released, Windows 2000 to great fanfare, sort of the successor to NT4, trying to chase down Novell and grab market share. And they honestly did a very good job of it. But Windows 2000 out of the gate was way open for viruses. And then, of course, the onslaught of now broadband internet began to make a thing. And it just, it just opened up this new thing, like where now you had to include, if you're selling IT, you had to include backup software, you had to include, antivirus software, and just this rise of this entire security apparatus, which, who knows what that actually, looking back 20 years, we're talking like probably trillions. And company values and things like that, just to try to secure a single operating system or an operating system from a particular vendor. And it's amazing, right? And here we are, 20 years later, where really not much is all that different. The love bug was truly a social engineering thing, right? Somebody gets it, they click on it, bam, it spreads. That's still being used today. And then obviously the rise of some of these more like with the whole SolarWinds thing, that's getting into the actual code, where the user's not doing anything other than installing it, and bam, great job, you got infected code. So I'm just thinking about just all that's happened in these last years, and where I know my career was impacted by this in terms of I turned and became a security consultant there, got my CISSP, started doing security vulnerability scans and tests and all that stuff, and at the end of the day, I mean, Windows on the endpoint certainly is still that big challenge. I mean, I remember just yesterday after we had our blog, I got a notification. By the way, you need to reboot your machine, and if you don't, I'm going to do it for you, kind of thing. I'm like, hey, time out. I got work I'm doing, right? I mean, it's automated. It's nice. Thank you for automatically pulling it down, but it is somewhat disruptive too for that user. But we could go on and on this, but.
So Chris and Simon, here's a true or false question for you. True or false? No matter how hard you work, you're never going to be up to date.
Correct. Or true, excuse me.
True. No matter how hard you work, you're never going to be totally up to date and totally protected. If you think you are, then just turn your head and let somebody pick up your laptop and walk out of the room with it.
Yeah. That is very true, and in fact, I'd go one step further and take that from a slightly different angle, which is the harder you work, the more vulnerable you may well become. So I think what you meant by that, Andy, is that no matter how hard you work from an IT perspective, right, you will always have machines out there and systems out there that continue to be vulnerable and need protecting, right? What I look at it from is from an employee point of view, which is the harder you work, the more applications you've got, the more you do what I call time slice, which is, flick between watching Netflix and answering an email and having dinner with the kids and jumping back on to answer another email. The harder an employee works, the more the risk goes up as well, because you're not necessarily focused, and you find it even more so now because we're all working at home, right? There's more emails coming in, there's more ways to communicate. We're jumping, we're slicing from one piece of work to another. We're suddenly jumping out and helping our kids with homework. We're coming back. There's a risk associated with that, which is you could get caught off guard from an employee point of view as well.
Yeah. Let me say it slightly different from a business perspective. No matter how much money you spend, you can never be 100% protected. That's when it really starts to get real for the business and the business owners.
Yeah, Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting because I think Citrix have started talking about this a lot more recently, haven't they, Andy? Particularly around sort of like zero trust. All right. And this, I know zero trust has been around for a long time, but definitely in our EUC sort of space, that concept of zero trust seems to be coming up more and more. And I think that that's what a lot of this is about, which is, it doesn't matter what you do and how much you try and spend, there's always work to be done. And so if that's the way of the world, then perhaps a zero trust methodology and approach is the best one.
So the next section after this section is around VDI and desktop as a service, which to me, since the late 90s, has always been a security play when I could control the destiny of the Windows workload. But to your comment, yes, Citrix is becoming more of a security focused company. Now they're a little schizophrenic because they won't come out and say that because they don't want to ruffle the feathers of their partners who are true security companies. But yeah, a lot of their recent acquisitions and new plays are around adding security to their suite of offerings, which again, to me, the centralized hosted desktop of some type has always been a security play as long as you put it on the right VLAN and protected it as best you could. Citrix has always been a security play to me. I've got a client that was hacked last year before. FBI came and said, "Hey, you're using Citrix for half your users. Why aren't you using it for all your users?" And I was like, "Well, there you go. I told you." And the funny thing about that is that client, a year and a half later, is now going the opposite direction and rolling out laptops again for some odd reason. But who knows? But let's cover this section where it says patching is about operations, not security. Simon, is there anything we haven't covered that you're trying to get across in that part of the blog?
There's an update to that, and it comes from speaking to two customers just in the last couple of weeks. One of those customers, actually, I'm lying, it's a potential customer. One of those potential customers that we've spoken to in the last couple of days has got 70,000 endpoints sat in their offices at the moment that are sat there doing nothing. Another one has got about 3,500. It's actually, that one I can talk about. That's the Office of the National Statistics in the Netherlands. They're an IGEL customer, and they've got about 3,000 endpoints. But whether it's them or whether it's the 70,000 seat customer that I can't talk about, the point being here is that even though these offices have got devices in them and everybody's now working from home, those devices that are still or were still running Windows still need to be patched. It's really interesting. It's like, I've got an office, it's got 3,000 devices in it. They were all running Windows. IT is still having to update and patch those systems, even though no one's been in the office for the last 12 months and no one's likely to be in the office for the next 6 months. They need to keep them patched and secure. So there's a cost. It's just, it's mind-boggling, really, isn't it? It's
Can you imagine what's going to happen when they come back and start using those and realize all the things that got broken during the time they weren't there, or maybe the machines were turned off and now they've got an hour and a half worth of patching to do?
Right, and that obviously is the link to where IGEL is coming in, right? Which is for the National Statistics Agency in the Netherlands. They've already made that change and said, this is ludicrous. Let's get IGEL OS onto all of those devices that are in the office. And for the other 70,000 seat customer we're talking to, that's the proposition we're having, which is let's get Windows off those machines. Standard life insurance would be another one. We did a video case study about only last month. Exactly the same thing, right? All of these machines running Windows, sat in an office doing nothing. There's a cost associated with even keeping the lights on from machines that aren't being used, which doesn't make a great deal of sense to anyone, does it?
Yeah. Well, one thing I was thinking about this was on the operations side of the coin, right? You're talking about physical machines sitting in the offices being accessed remotely from home, essentially. That sounds like what they'd like to do versus go straight to the cloud. There's physical security measures too that are just part of just normal. I mean, preventing a somebody be able to get into that building and accessing a device physically. I mean, it's the same thing that you have with these data center securities, right? Limiting admin access in, and you get physical access to the machine. All bets could be off, right? I mean, so there's that piece too that is not necessarily touched on in this article. but it is a component that, you know, I remember when the breach occurred of the Capitol, I saw a lot of blog people or post people saying, you know, they were accessing machines that they literally just ran out of the office and left their machines logged in and everything. And, you know, what type of information was either picked up or taken or whatever, access USB keys, because they had physical access, not necessarily attacking it remotely. And so that's a piece that I think, you know, whatever that number is for businesses, but it is certainly part of the infrastructure here for maintaining security.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the other thing that the blog post obviously talks about, Andy, is just, you know, sort of like the rise of outside of VDI and desktop as a service, which, you know, we can obviously talk about how that helps, but the rise of modern management versus the traditional PCLM type of technologies, right? You know, one of the other challenges that people have faced in the last 12 months is that when the PC or the laptop, the endpoint was inside the network, it was significantly easier to scan, analyze, patch, and update. Now that all of a sudden these employees and people are now working from home, it becomes a lot more difficult to try and manage those environments. And it's not just about patching and vulnerabilities, it's all the other agents that are on the Windows device as well, right? So I don't know, typical Windows device might have 5 different agents on it that are trying to manage it and secure it in one way or another, possibly 10. You know, number one, they're using up a whole host of resource, but they all need to be remotely managed now. And, you know, asking people to dial up via a VPN so they can get their Windows update or the latest patch or, you know, the latest release of Windows 10 or update their AV. I mean, it's archaic. It's just, you know, it's too costly for the user. It's too costly for IT.
So are you guys saying we can't just rely on the users to keep their own machines up to date? That's a joke.
Well, you say it's a joke, but no, I know. But if I don't want to take this conversation down a rat hole, but you know, if you think about your phone, right? Arguably, some people have got Android, some people have got iOS, but iPhone does that in a way that a user can keep themselves up to date. Sure, there are tools that IT need to make sure that people are updating it and all the rest of it, but we are trying to move to a world where those updates are becoming less visible and are, can I use the word frictionless? Is that not too much of a cliche word? But, you know, my Sonos system updates itself when it's ready. My PlayStation 5 updates itself when it's ready. My phone does it. It actually, it's the Windows computing device, which arguably is one of the most powerful pieces of kit that people have probably got in their home and is one of the most complex and comprehensive operating systems that we've got. It's that one that seems to be the one that's clunky and horrible. And, you know, we get a blue screen that says, please go make a cup of tea for 20 minutes while I reboot your machine and break all your applications.
But guys, that's by design though. That Microsoft made it to be open and uncontrolled from day one. That now comes back to bite you. Whereas iOS, you get your iOS from Apple, you get your apps from the App Store. The regression testing can all be done within the world of Apple, and they control your destiny there. That makes it doable. In the case of IGEL, what we're talking about here, right? It's a closed ecosystem. If you want to go out and create your own custom partition, so be it. But for the most part, it's a closed ecosystem. So you can push out updates and feel pretty confident that it's going to work and it's been tested. Whereas in the Windows world, Microsoft, I know in Windows these days, you can say only allow things to be installed from either things that are certified or from the store. Nobody does that, right? Everybody just kind of goes and gets what they want. And I need something on the fly because I got this thing I'm doing in the lab. Let me go install that. Well, nobody knows that's on my machine. Not in the general world. Yeah.
And I think that is the bridge, right? That's the bridge in the conversation to VDI and desktop as a service. Because I think what VDI has done for so many organizations for so long is give people a way of deploying centralized applications, centralized data, but in a closed environment, right? An environment where I've got one image. I can use image management in the Citrix world, right? I've got one gold image that's got my applications on it. 1,000 users can log on every single day, and I know it's going to work. At the end of the day, if even whilst they're logged onto that image, I can be updating, patching, scanning the second image, and tomorrow I can roll that image out and 1,000 users get that new image. If it all goes wrong, guess what? Plan B, you just go back to the image they were using the day before. Everything, you suddenly get all of the benefits of Windows. And I'm like you, I love Windows 10. I love Windows applications. You know, I jump. One day I'm on an IGEL device, on an IGEL OS. One day I'm on a Mac OS. One day I'm on a Windows device. I love using Windows. I always have used Windows. I love it. But, you know, you can't help but feel that, you know, the right thing to do now is to that 30-year-old operating system and where it is today. I really do believe it does belong in the cloud, not on the endpoint moving forward.
Yeah, the other thing I was thinking about here on that is other things that have risen in the last, 10, 15 years. I'll go with 10, right? And the rise of this cloud data center built on, in my opinion, available bandwidth, accessing something that is truly off-prem. But because you've got the bandwidth, you've got, broadband accessibility, and some will say, well, it's not completely across but you got LTE, you got, fiber in some cases. I mean, it's just made that, and it really comes down to that user experience. The protocols are better. They can handle various bandwidths, VPN connections or whatever. And now we've got the rise of 5G going mainstream across the country. And think about, we talked about this at, I don't know, one of the, I think the last time I heard about it was be Disrupt a year ago. Just sort of think about the rise of some of the companies that were built on a world in 4G or 3G, some of these cloud-based companies, and now 5G is going to give you just crazy bandwidth and availability, and that comes down to that user experience now. So if you and I need more power. I'm a power user. Okay, well I'm used to that very powerful laptop that I got from fill in the blank vendor. You could do that in the cloud. Now you just need a really nice connection, and so that I think is another avenue. Like put the cost together. Why would you not go to the cloud?
Hey, Chris, I'll tweak one thing you said. It's great to have a really nice connection, but a decent connection if you're using Citrix or VMware, it's still good enough. And you may notice a little lag, but with the benefits that come out of centralized and operational and security, if you just have a decent connection these days. I mean, remember, we're probably three guys that grew up on dial-up connections. I saw it work then. Now it's like, oh my God, this is awesome.
Well, for those listening that are not working for vendors, but there's a whole underground thing when you go to these trade shows, right? And you're getting a booth and you're paying for internet. They're not giving you fiber connections. You're getting like 5 megabits or some really crappy internet, right? And if you want to get more, you got to pay more. But even with that, at Citrix Summit a year ago in Orlando, that's what we had, the bare minimum. I was running IGEL, accessing Citrix in the cloud, on the demo cloud, and my UMS in Azure. I couldn't tell a difference at all. It wasn't very laggy, and even with that, which is maybe a step above, whatever, it was still functioning fine. It wasn't so bad that the user experience was terrible. That so
Chris,
it doesn't require much.
I remember specifically the day and where I was at when the first time I got more than 1 meg of connection, and I was a Citrix admin at the time, and I thought my world was solved.
Greater than T1. Yeah.
So Chris, where I thought you were going to go with that comment was what I have on the screen here, which is the rise of SaaS, which is a whole other thing, right? Applications as a service, desktop as a service, which we've been talking about. But just the fact that something like IGEL and the ability just to get an operating system that functions, that has a browser that is functional, that can get to all the world of SaaS, which is our future. I tell the story all the time. In 1996, IE6 came out, and I was told, okay, this is it. Every application is going to conform to working within IE6. Well, of course, that didn't exactly happen, but it is slowly happening where we see browser-based applications more than fat applications.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I'm using PowerPoint, for example, running out of Windows, but I could just switch to a browser and completely have everything I need, from whatever it is, Firefox, Chrome, Chromium, doesn't really matter. I get the same it's not better, user experience in some cases. Do I really need that Windows OS anymore just to get to it?
Well, I think this is, I mean, maybe this is a conversation for another podcast, Andy, right? But it's what I think we're talking about here is what does the future look like? IGEL, hopefully people understand, what we mean by that tagline, next gen edge OS for cloud workspaces. And obviously, Andy, you and us, we work together very closely in deploying VDI, desktop as a service environments, and IGEL is a perfect fit for those types of environments. But we're seeing more and more, and I think you've done quite a lot of work in this area, right, over the last 12 months particularly, is that you can use the IGEL operating system not just as your entry into the world of a virtualized desktop, but also into a world of SaaS applications, and also into a world of Microsoft Teams, RingCentral, Zoom. There are more and more applications that people are now running locally and natively on IGEL OS than ever before. And the reason why they're doing that is that people do want the same or a similar level of experience, right? They want to be able to be connected. If you look at the amount of bandwidth that we can run, this call on now, right? It doesn't need 5G. I mean, I quite often roam the streets on a 3 or a 4G connection, probably, and I quite happily hold a Zoom call or a RingCentral call. It's no problem at all. But the truth of the fact is that, lots of applications now can either be a small footprint of an application can be installed locally on the IGEL operating system. You can gain access to SaaS apps. You can gain access to your VDI desktop as a service apps, but you don't need the full-blown, 30, 50 gig, 30-year-old Windows type of operating system on the endpoint, because it does come with some challenges, particularly around cost of management, cost of security, patching, etc.
I think I just had a thought here. I'm almost 50 years old. My youngest kid is 11. My oldest ones are almost going off to college. And I've got this concept in life that I think my wife is starting to buy into, and that is kind of live minimally and go enjoy doing stuff. I think at this conversation, what we're really talking about here is, use the minimal but functional solution, and don't complicate your life by having this, 80 billion lines of code, whatever it is. Maybe you guys know, operating system on the endpoint. No matter how great it is, it's like all that junk in my garage. It's great. I'm glad I have it, but I just don't need it anymore.
Yeah. Well, I certainly, if you look at, if we just take our IGEL hardware, right? We have the UD2 at the low end, right? I'll skip over the UD Pocket for a second, but the UD2 is designed for certain use cases, right? And, if you're looking at it from a Windows perspective, if you're an IT, it's like, does everybody need Windows? If all I need is get access to these apps, what do they really need Windows for?
Well, add to that the ability to do through Citrix, VMware, Microsoft, the ability to get Windows when you truly do need it, and now you've got what you need. It's like me. I don't have a chainsaw anymore. When I need a chainsaw, I go down to Sunbelt Rentals and I rent a chainsaw for the day.
Yeah. That's exactly it. And I think you need to ask, not ourselves, but people that might be listening to this, is ask themselves the question: why do you need Windows? And my guess is that 9 times out of 10, you need Windows because of the applications that you're deploying. It's your business line applications that you're trying to get out to your users that were built on Windows many, many years ago. And someone came in probably a couple of years back and said, hey, we'll convert this business line application into a SaaS offering for you. And you looked at the price and went, I can't afford to do that for a very, very long time, right? The point is that businesses are built, particularly businesses that have been around for a while, they're built on Windows-based applications and the data within those. So people do need Windows, right? And no doubt over time, that will be a tail that starts to drop off. But we do still need Windows. I think the question here is that, do you really need it? Do you really need it at the edge? I love that analogy of the chainsaw, by the way, Andy. I think that works really, really well.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking
Well, let
too.
me add one more piece to that. My father passed away in '97. I had to clean out his massive, detached garage. We had 6 chainsaws.
Yeah. Probably one bro needed a new saw or new chain, and it's just better to just go buy a new one. Maybe.
Well, and to add to that story, we had 6 chainsaws that didn't run anymore.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
Hey, Simon and Chris, I've got highlighted here section 2, which I think we've covered. I've got section 3 here. Section 2 is remember VDI and the promise of desktop as a service. Section 3 is VDI and desktop as a service, reducing the operational cost of patching. Simon, I feel like we've covered the second one, but I don't know about this bottom one. Have we covered the operational cost of patching and how you dive into that during the blog? We've got about 5 minutes left.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, I think I started on it, right? I mentioned machine creation services in there, single image management. If I go back very quickly to the start of this, if you're someone that is involved, secure. This is a security topic, right? You need to patch because of the vulnerabilities and because of the risk. Okay, fine. But guess what? It's probably not the security guy that's doing the patching. It's the IT operations guy, the Windows engineering guy. And he has to go through a number of different steps. He has to understand what patches just come out. Okay, fine. Then he needs to understand what vulnerabilities are those patches solving. Then he needs to understand across his estate how many of those vulnerabilities apply to him and exist. Then he needs to test that patch, make sure it doesn't break anything, needs to make sure that the build that he's testing against is the same as the build that everybody's got. And then we need to roll that out, and that comes with challenges. And also, we need a backup plan, right? Because if things go wrong or an application breaks, what's the backup plan? So there's a whole host of work that goes into, from an IT operations point of view, into terms of deploying that patch. The moment you take that methodology that I've just gone through, and instead of applying it to a PC on an end at the edge, and instead you apply it to a VDI image, all of a sudden the amount of work is significantly reduced. Your users don't know any different. You take your image, you scan it, you find out what vulnerabilities you do and you don't have, you find out what patches you're going to need to apply. You apply those patches once, you test the applications, you make sure nothing's broken, and if everything works, tomorrow you flick the switch and everybody in your VDI environment suddenly starts to use that new image that you've created. So you're updating one image, or maybe a couple, but you're updating one image as opposed to thousands or tens of thousands. And so,
Hey, Simon,
reducing the operational cost,
one,
it's easy. Sorry, go on, Andy.
I want to add one piece to that, which you've talked around but haven't said. In a VDI world or a desktop as a service world, at the very least, systematically, you're going to reboot that environment at least once a week to a gold image, if not daily, if not every time they log off. That is a huge security benefit. Just the fact that you get to restart the thing and get rid of all the junk from the hour before is massive. I get the situation with the local government that had the issue. They did get some of the virus stuff, some of the malware on the Citrix environment, but they rebooted it away in seconds. It was awesome. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, no, 100%. Keeps it clean for longer.
Yeah, I think on a similar note, one of the things that those applications or those technologies that kind of risen up over those years, one of those that was really cool was Unidesk, right? Citrix actually ended up acquiring it, but seeing what they would do, take that image, right, that you're constantly cloning out, right, reduce it down to one gold image, and then just layering in the apps that you need at runtime in some cases, but you've got you've patched your main gold image, and then you've got these other apps that you're maintaining and updating, but they're not part of the actual image. And just very cool technologies like that can even break it out even further. I don't see, it's obviously quite amazing, obviously, that's now sort of a mainstream, if you will, right? I mean, if you're not using that approach, why not?
Yeah, agreed.
Well, Chris,
agreed.
Chris, I will hop in and throw in my asterisk on that one all the time. And I see this, I saw it last week. Customers try to use layering technologies, which are, like you pointed out, 100% awesome, great, good to have. At the same time, these are the same customers that didn't have a successful rollout in a flat image, and then they start adding in layers to that. My one caveat to what you just said, because you're not wrong, is make sure you can have happy users in a monolithic image first, and then start thinking about how to decouple the apps and make your updating easier. I just warn people that I see it all the time. People jump in and they make it way too complex, and it wasn't good to begin with, and now they make it even worse.
Yeah. Well, truly, I mean, back to some prior comments. I know we're coming close to the end here, but it's just, that question, why do we still need Windows? Well, there's a whole lot of people out there still trained on Windows. If you all of a sudden rip it out and say, now use a browser, you've got a training issue with, that 40, 50-year-old teacher, doctor, nurse, or whatever, that is used to a way of working, and now you've completely changed that. That has to be taken into account. You may just be using Windows because you don't want to go through the training uplift immediately, right? You just, blank cars make that change. And so, but, layering in, if you will, change is something that also needs to be taken into account as you move to the cloud and essentially just getting to apps and not a desktop to get to apps.
Yeah.
Hey guys, is it as simple as summing up this topic by saying use IGEL to keep it simple, stupid?
Of course. I'm the marketing guy. I'm just going to say yes, 100%.
I've seen the light. Yes, I think there's, I guess it comes down to, we have quite a bit that we can do for customers in terms of, saving in various areas. But it all comes down to, the use cases. I mean, so
maybe my statement should have been use IGEL to keep it simple and save money, and maybe that's more tangible to the business. I think that's probably a big part of what Simon's saying in the blog.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's not what we say, it's what our customers say, and I can only sort of repeat what they say, right? But Andy, you and I, we've got joint customers who we know have moved from having Windows at the edge to having IGEL at the edge, and the opportunity cost is that their IT departments no longer spend hours, days on having to worry about patching and securing the endpoint, right? They've moved from one person in support looking after 350 employees to one person in support looking after 25,000 employees. In terms of endpoint management, deploying IGEL significantly saves the amount of operational cost that's needed when it comes to endpoint management. And I suppose that's probably the best place to sort of finish up on. And my view, if I try and take my IGEL hat off for a second, I think if you dig into other areas of the market, this is a trend that we're going to see. We're going to start to see more and more devices and operating systems that are leaner appear at the edge. You've only got to take the IoT market, which I know has got nothing to do with what we're talking about today, but the IoT market, you don't go and have a Windows 10 operating system installed on a wind turbine sensor, as an example, right? You don't typically see Windows being used in ATM machines or in healthcare machines anymore, right? The truth of the fact is the operating systems that are being deployed at the edge, including those in end user compute, need to be a little bit leaner, they need to be more secure, and they need to be easier to manage at scale.
Right. Well, guys, I've got like 10 more things I'd like to cover here, including seeing like a blue screen of death from Windows at an airport kiosk and how that should not be anymore. But
or on an airplane.
We'll save that for another date. Simon, if you have blogs that you write, I encourage you to write more, and let's jump on here and talk about it. I love having these conversations, and the goal here is to find a way to help disseminate the information differently and in a way that people can consume at different times. So I appreciate you jumping on, and this has been great.
Thank you, Andy. Greatly appreciated.
Chris, thank you as always.
Not a problem. Look forward to the next one.
We'll take tomorrow off and not do any more podcasts this week, all right?
That's right. Appreciate that. Simon, thanks again. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Take care.